Hello and welcome back to our YouTube channel, Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this autumn trees watercolour line and wash, or ink line work painted with watercolour. So this process is very beginner friendly because it encourages you to practice and focus on building up your drawing and sketching skills, which of course anybody can learn. And then those drawing and sketching skills are fantastic for creating the line work. Here, these sort of autumn trees and the very loose kind of scrubby ground around them. And straight away we have our focus, and it's literally then just a matter of embellishing it with a little bit of paint just to kind of get the effects across that we want. You can pause the video here and take a screenshot if you want to refer to it or download it. I simply sketched out two very simple trees with a few remaining autumn leaves in pencil, and then went over my pencil outline with waterproof black fine liners and brush pens. Now here you can see I've used a little bit of masking fluid to mask out those remaining autumn leaves. The reason for this is I want a lovely burst of colour at the end when I add those. I used an old brush for the masking fluid, one that I'd rinsed out and then rubbed some hand soap or brush soap through the hairs, and that protects them from the masking fluid. Don't use your best brushes for this. Right, just before we get into the demo, a quick plug for our books. Landscapes in Watercolour and Flowers in Watercolour are available to purchase or pre-order, and you can find links in the description below if you're interested in taking a look at our books. If you find these demos helpful, hopefully you'll enjoy the books too. Now I've sped the footage up a bit, but what I'll be doing first is wetting the paper all over. My paper is Saunders Waterford hot press watercolour paper, but you can use cold press. I just happen to prefer hot press myself. I've got my painting taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking fluid, and my board's at about 20-degree tilt because I like to have a bit of sort of downward flow from gravity as I'm painting. So I've first used a light wash of raw sienna and painted that across the whole painting. I'm now adding cerulean blue here and there and just allowing that to marry and mingle with the wash. I'm trying to build up a sort of sunset glow in the sky, and I'm doing this by adding different colours into this wash but keeping it nice and light so that I get this lovely transparency. Sap green went on next, and now this is a little bit of light red, or you can use Venetian red. Still keeping the paint flowing, using horizontal brush strokes with my large wash brush. The one that I'm using is a 1.5 inch Princeton Aqua Elite modeler brush. I'm now bringing in a little bit of light value Payne's grey, and you can see that my colours aren't turning muddy. Keeping a nice light touch and then a little bit of extra sort of brush strokes in a slightly different direction as I start to build up the look of the forest. So I'm going back in with a bit of cerulean blue again with my Payne's grey, and I've swapped to a size 2 quill brush, and I'm just dragging a clean damp quill brush up through the washes to create these sort of vertical lines through the wash, and this will just give me the impression of distant trees in the autumn mist. Notice how my variegated wash is darker at the bottom and the top, keeping it nice and light across the middle so the trees in the distance stand out. I've now dipped into a really rich creamy mix of sepia and Payne's grey, and using my modeler brush I'm just dabbing it this way and that onto the paper for the foreground below the trees and around the base of the trees. I've also dipped into burnt sienna and some sap green, And now using the tip of my size 5 palette knife to just scrape through that lovely rich paint, and I can go back to the white of the paper or the colour that's underneath from the wash and just getting the impression of all these grasses and weeds and brambles and things on the forest floor. And now I'm going to use ordinary fine ground table salt and just sprinkle a little bit of it across where the paper has nearly dried, just to give me some texture to suggest more of that forest floor, leaves, leaf litter, that sort of thing. And hopefully you noticed that just before I did that, I laid my board flat. That's because I don't need the washes to run anymore. They'll stay where I put them now that I've laid my board flat. While I'm waiting for the salt to work its magic, I've mixed a bit of Payne's Grey and sepia, and I'm using my size 2 quill brush just to roughly paint in the tree trunks and the branches, while I've still got my masking fluid protecting the autumn leaves. The sky wash is nearly dry, so the wash that I'm painting over these branches is staying where I put it. Wait for your sky wash to dry if you reach this point, if you're painting along with me, and if you reach this point and your sky wash is still wet. Now, just before I leave everything to dry completely, I'm using the fan brush and some perylene green, which is technically a black, but it's a lovely green black. And I'm using the fan brush and the brush strokes that gives me to add even more texture and suggestions of that scrubby wild forest floor. And when I'm happy with deepening the value and the texture of the forest floor, then I can leave my painting to dry completely. So here's the dry painting, and I'm really liking the way it's looking so far. I'm going to use a clean dry brush to brush off any salt crystals that didn't activate and that are still there. Most of them have dissolved, and the effects are very, very subtle, but they give me some nice texture. I'm now going to remove the masking fluid using my rubber cement pickup, otherwise known as an adhesive eraser. And here you can see how lovely and bright these leaves are, perfect for me to add some autumn bright pops of colour. I'm going to start off with these leaves on the left, which I want to be more muted than the small tree on the right, which is going to be the focus. So I'm very loosely painting in mid-value transparent yellow, a mix of burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown, and then I'll add a little bit of sap green at the end, just allowing that to sort of wet blend on the page with those other colours to give me the look of leaves that have turned in part, but not entirely lost their beautiful green colour. And for the leaves on the right, I'm going to keep them a bit brighter. So I'm going to go over most of the leaves with transparent yellow to start with, doing them in small groups so that the paint stays wet in each leaf. And then I'm going to drop in transparent orange. Not everywhere, just here and there, so I get that lovely bright orange working beautifully here. And then what I'll do is I'll dip into the mixture that I made for the tree on the left from burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown, and just deepen up the brown, golden brown shades here and there in these colours, just to keep things nicely balanced. So it's just enough of a pop of colour to work in this sort of subdued, misty twilight scene. So I've worked across all the leaves in this tree on the right side in the same way, and hopefully you can see it's looking quite effective. I think this painting is just about done now. The light's making it look a little bit washed out, but I'll get a better photograph of the way the colours look in a moment. I'm just going to remove the tape and have a look at it with its clean white border, and that helps me to sort of get a better impression of how it looks. I can sort of see it with fresh eyes, if you see what I mean, once those messy brush strokes on the tape have been removed. And I'm really liking the way this is looking. So let's take a look at the actual colours. This is a better representation of it. Notice how the misty distance really glows with that lovely autumnal light, that autumn mist, and really contrasts with the quite sort of grungy dark values and shadows of the foreground forest floor. And of course those tree branches really pop with the autumn leaves. If you enjoyed the video and if you'd like to support us, then please take a look at the links below, where you'll find links to check out our books, but also you can check out our Patreon sites. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really do appreciate each and every one of you, and we wish you a wonderful rest of the week and happy painting. Bye.